Welcome back to The Factor Uncensored. Thank you for joining us for our second half hour. In Mississippi, 6 former law enforcement officers called the Goon Squad have received prison terms that add up to more than 130 years from the feds. All have pleaded guilty to torturing 2 black men during a racist assault. Prosecutors say the former officers called themselves the Goon Squad because of their tendency to use excessive force and then cover it up. In January, the officers, who are all white, raided a home without a warrant. They handcuffed 2 black men they found inside, mocking, beating, and torturing them for more than an hour. That included the use of stun guns and sexual assault with a sex toy. The attack ended with one of the officers who shot one of the men in the mouth, injuring him critically. Their plea agreements call for prison sentences ranging from 5 to 40 years. My next guest has the reaction. And joining us on The Factor Uncensored to talk about this incredible story out of Mississippi is attorney and former judge and former police officer. And because of those experiences, Charles, we wanted you to talk about this. I mean, it's just mind-blowing what these 6 officers, 5 deputies, 1 police officer did, and they call themselves the Goon Squad. Your thoughts about this?
Well, what is coming out during the sentencing, where you're hearing some horrifying testimony from the victims, is a culture that many people have complained about in America for years. And for people that don't have the perspective, right, that don't have the vantage of this consistent mistreatment that we see in impoverished communities of color in some areas, which you don't see in all areas or even in most areas of this country, is you see this widespread oppression that is known, that people are as palpable, but nothing else occurs, and there is no oversight. And it comes to, when you don't have oversight on police power, there is a tremendous chance for corruption to occur. And what happened here is racially charged. It's sexual violence. It's incredible in its scope. And frankly, I don't think the sentences, the worst offender got 40 years. But I don't think the sentences were, in fact, tough enough. I think these men should all spend the rest of their lives behind bars.
And when we take a look at some of the details, many said that they had no warrant when they went to arrest or to torture the guys in the house. It was simply because they were in a house with a white female, and they lived, 2 of them lived there with her, and they didn't like that, and they wanted them out of that house, which brings in that racial component.
Well, I think there was probably more to the story, right? I think there was some other motivation that, not to minimize the impact of race on the situation, but I think there was probably more than just they wanted these 2 black men out of this house, right? I think there was probably more backstory to it that we are not privy to, but not at all a justification for it, right? But these were 6 policemen, just to have a police task force that was referred to as the Goon Squad, that was known for their aggressive tactics, largely against drug crime, as opposed to fighting. Because Jackson, Mississippi is a town that has a significant amount of violent crime for a town of its size, right? Mm-hmm. And you do want proactive policing that engages the community. What you don't want is what these men were doing. Not only did they torture them, they were trying to plant drugs, they destroyed evidence. This was outside the scope of the police function. And this is what happens when law enforcement is able to exist without oversight. And if you dive deep into what the Goon Squad did to these 2 men, it's absolutely horrifying. It is torture that you would expect in Nazi Germany and not in America. And there is simply, 40 years was probably not enough for the main one, and the other sentences, we're still waiting on one. But at least they were significant, but they should have been the rest of their life. You should not be able, under the color of law, be able to torture people like this.
One of the victims, Michael Jenkins, was actually shot in the mouth. Now we're hearing that the district attorney's office there may have to go over all of their previous cases because of their behavior in this case. And that's standard, right, Charles? That's typical. If you find some cops may have been corrupt, It could go back years. It could go back decades. I think they've been together, not all of them, but in some form for the last 20 years.
No, most certainly. This calls into question everything they ever did, right? Not just the violent aspects, but the fact that they were so ready to plant drugs to try to silence these men or discredit their stories, right? I imagine the Mouse shooting was probably some sort of accidental. Speculate that it was probably in the process of torturing them, there was an accidental discharge of the firearm, which is why this unraveled, right? It is terrifying to think that if there wasn't the gun injury, that these officers would most likely have been able to plant the drugs and, facilitate their evil plan with no consequence. And what that makes you do, much like here in Houston, where we had a corrupt, unchecked, unsupervised narcotics division that did horrible things. And then you had to go back and re-examine all of their actions. It's the same thing, this Goon Squad. And the fear is there are going to be some real violent criminals that were caught up in the net of these bad guys that certainly should walk free for fear of continuing the imprisonment of innocent people, which most assuredly happened.